common myth about high achievers, that they have something the rest of the world doesn't. A secret advantage, a special talent, some hidden code that makes success easier for them. But that's not the truth. High achievers don't win because they avoid failure. They win because they avoid the things that cause failure. Not the dramatic mistakes, the subtle ones, the invisible ones, the ones that go unnoticed until it's too late. Because success isn't just about what you do. It's about what you don't do. It's about what you refuse to allow into your life, the habits you say no to, the temptations you shut down, the traps you've trained yourself to spot before they steal your momentum. The people who rise and stay there are not perfect. They're disciplined, not in the glamorous ways, but in the ways no one sees. They are ruthless about how they spend their time. They are selective about who they give energy to. They are precise with their routines. And above all, they are relentless about protecting the system that protects their progress. And that protection doesn't happen by accident. It happens because they've learned, sometimes the hard way, that a few small mistakes, repeated consistently, are more dangerous than any one big failure. That drift is more dangerous than destruction. That habits kill more potential than chaos ever could. They've learned how to spot those mistakes, the subtle ones, the ones that masquerade as harmless, the ones that whisper instead of shout, the ones that dress up as ambition but are actually avoidance, the ones that feel smart but are slowly eroding everything they're working to build. This is what separates the ones who rise from the ones who plateau. Not just effort, but awareness. Not just drive, but direction. Not just speed, but precision. High achievers don't just know what to do. They know what to avoid, what to say no to, what to eliminate, what to protect at all costs. Because success is not just built, it's defended. And every level you reach comes with a new set of traps, new distractions, new patterns that can pull you down faster than you climbed. If you're not watching closely, if you're not intentional, if you're not protecting your edge, you lose it. So this is the blueprint. Not for more hustle, but for more wisdom. Not for doing more, but for removing what doesn't belong. These are the 10 mistakes high achievers avoid, not by luck, but by discipline. And the more of them you eliminate, the more clearly the path will open. The first mistake that kills success is trying to please everyone. It sounds harmless. It sounds noble. It even sounds strategic. Keep everyone happy. Stay in good standing. Avoid friction. But it's poison to progress. Because the moment you try to please everyone, you lose sight of what actually matters. You stop leading. You start performing. You start chasing approval instead of pursuing alignment. High achievers know they're not for everyone. They're not trying to be. They're not adjusting their vision based on who claps and who doesn't. They don't dilute their decisions for the sake of making people comfortable. Because the more time you spend managing perceptions, the less time you spend building reality. Pleasing people is expensive. It costs energy, time, clarity, direction. It pulls you away from your priorities. It waters down your execution. You say yes to the things that don't serve you. And suddenly your day is filled with obligations that lead nowhere. And the scariest part, most of the people you're trying to please won't remember your effort. Or worse, they'll expect it again. You're not here to manage everyone's opinion. You're here to lead. And leadership means disappointing some people. It means drawing hard lines. It means doing what's right, even when it's unpopular. especially when it's unpopular, because progress is rarely convenient. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until everyone agrees. You need to get comfortable with being misunderstood, not reckless, not dismissive, but focused. Focused enough to stay on your path, even when others question it. Focused enough to say, I understand your opinion, but I am not building my life around it. Because when you need everyone to like you, you stop being yourself. You filter your truth. You soften your standard. You hesitate to say what needs to be said, to do what needs to be done. And slowly, you trade power for approval. High achievers don't operate that way. They're not reckless, but they are clear. They know what matters. They know what moves the needle. They're not rude, but they are unapologetic about their boundaries. They don't allow guilt to dictate their calendar. They don't allow social pressure to override personal conviction. They understand that every yes is a no to something else, that every compromise must be weighed, that their energy is finite, that their time is sacred, that clarity only survives in a protected environment. And people-pleasing is the opposite of protection. It's the open-door policy to chaos. You will have to say no sometimes, to friends, to coworkers, to family, to opportunities that look good but don't fit. You'll have to say no to being liked, to being praised, to being invited back. And every time you do, it will sting, but it will also sharpen you. It will make you cleaner, clearer, more aligned. Because people-pleasing isn't really about kindness. It's about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of standing alone. But high achievers know that solitude is part of the climb, that conviction is often lonely, that leadership is often quiet. They choose long-term alignment over short-term harmony. They choose real respect over cheap approval. They choose the few who get it over the many who don't. Because when you stop needing to please everyone, you start to please the one person who matters most, your future self. And that version of you, the one who reaches the top, they didn't get there by asking for permission. They didn't get there by playing small so others could feel big. They didn't get there by trying to keep everyone happy. They got there by choosing to be honest, focused, free. The second mistake high achievers avoid is waiting for motivation. It's the drug most people are addicted to without realizing it. That hit of energy, that surge of inspiration, that lightning bolt that makes the work feel easy for a moment. And when it's there, people move. But when it's gone, they stall, they drift, they watch, they wait. And that's the trap. Motivation feels like momentum, but it's not. It's weather. It changes with your mood, with your energy, with your circumstances. And if you build your consistency around it, you will always live at the mercy of something outside of your control. High achievers know better. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. They build habits that operate regardless of how they feel. They show up not because they're inspired, but because that's the standard. That's the agreement they've made with themselves. That's the contract they've already signed. Motivation is a gift, but discipline is the foundation. And the people who win don't chase motivation. They build a structure that makes motivation irrelevant. Because when the routine is locked in, when the habits are installed, when the schedule is set, the feeling doesn't matter. The action still happens. You have to stop treating motivation like a requirement. It's not. It's a bonus. It's the tailwind, not the engine. The engine is consistency. And consistency is built through friction, through repetition, through showing up again and again until what used to be hard becomes normal. That's what high achievers do. They reverse the formula. They don't wait to feel like it. They do it anyway. And once the action is in motion, then the feeling shows up. Not before, after. Because confidence doesn't come first. It comes after you prove to yourself that you'll show up no matter what. And that proof compounds. The more you act without needing the feeling, the more trust you build, not with the world, with yourself. And that trust, that's the real secret. That's the thing you're looking for when you chase motivation. You don't need more hype. You need more alignment, more self-respect, more days where you did what you said you would do. High achievers build their life on that. They don't wake up wondering what kind of day it will be. They already decided. The workout is already scheduled. The deep work block is already on the calendar. The system is already moving. They don't get trapped in the emotional weather of the morning. They get to work. And when life throws a curveball, which it always does, they adapt. Not by waiting until they feel like adjusting, but by moving immediately. Because they've trained that response. They've practiced it so many times that now, when it's inconvenient, when it's frustrating, when it's the last thing they want to do, they do it anyway. That's not talent. That's not genetics. That's repetition. That's design. That's the outcome of a life built around a standard instead of a mood. You have to ask yourself, how many opportunities have I missed because I was waiting to feel like doing the work? How many days have I lost because I was waiting for the right mood, the right song, the right quote, the right video, the right conditions? Those conditions are not coming, not consistently. You cannot build anything meaningful on top of a feeling that doesn't show up when you need it. So stop waiting, start moving, decide what matters, and do it without asking yourself how you feel about it. High achievers do hard things on schedule, and that schedule is non-negotiable. Because they know success doesn't ask if you're in the mood. Life doesn't pause while you look for inspiration. Results don't wait for your energy to feel perfect. They show up anyway, because it's not about how you feel. It's about who you are. And when you become the kind of person who keeps going without the hype, without the fire, without the cheering, you unlock a level of strength most people never touch. The third mistake high achievers avoid is chasing too many goals at once. It doesn't look like a mistake at first. It looks like ambition, like drive, like hunger. You write 10 goals, you start 5 new projects. You plan 3 big transformations. And for a while, it feels powerful, like you're finally turning things around until all of it starts collapsing under its own weight. Because the truth is, there is no power in divided attention. There is no mastery in scattered focus. And there is no long-term success in a strategy built on trying to do everything at the same time. When you stretch yourself too thin, you don't grow, you fracture. And you don't fail because you weren't capable. You fail because you didn't prioritize. High achievers move different. They don't try to crush everything at once. They don't confuse activity with effectiveness. They're not trying to impress anyone with how many things they're juggling. They're laser focused on what moves the needle, and they eliminate what doesn't. They understand that success is built by going deep, not wide, by mastering one thing at a time, by doing less, but doing it better. They know that the fastest way to get nowhere is to try and go everywhere at once. When you have too many goals, you never give any of them enough weight. You spread your energy across too many fronts. You have no clarity. no simplicity, no clear win. Just a bunch of half-finished projects and an overwhelming list of intentions that never become reality. And when that happens, you lose trust in yourself. You stop believing your own promises. You start seeing your goals as suggestions instead of commitments. Not because you're lazy, but because you keep biting off more than your system can handle. High achievers avoid this by being ruthless with clarity. They define the single most important objective. The one thing that, if accomplished, makes everything else easier or unnecessary. And then they aim all of their firepower at it. Time, energy, focus, all of it. Not forever, but long enough to make real traction. This is not a lack of ambition. This is precision. This is maturity. This is understanding that success isn't about how much you can start. It's about how much you can finish. And finishing requires focus. Finishing requires simplicity. Finishing requires eliminating 90% of the noise so you can dominate the 10% that matters. You have to stop romanticizing complexity. You have to stop confusing being overwhelmed with being productive. You have to stop thinking that your worth is tied to how much is on your plate. High achievers don't try to do everything. They build momentum by doing the right things in the right order, with the right intensity. You need to build your life around priorities, not pressure, around what matters, not what's loudest. That means making hard decisions, saying no to good ideas that don't align, delaying goals that don't serve your mission right now, sacrificing variety for depth. And when you do that, something incredible happens. Results show up faster because now your energy is concentrated. Your actions compound. Your time matters. You're not just checking boxes. You're building something real. This is how high achievers scale. Not by doing more, but by doing what matters most, over and over until it's built. They know they can eventually do everything, but not all at once. So they sequence, they stagger, they stack wins, and every win strengthens the next one. You don't need a dozen goals right now. You need one goal with depth, one mission with teeth, one outcome that you own fully. Everything else can wait. Everything else can come later, but if you don't lock in one, you'll keep spinning in circles. It's not a lack of time that's stopping you, it's a lack of focus. It's the belief that you can do everything, and that all of it needs to be done now. That belief is killing your progress. It's flooding your calendar. It's bleeding your energy. It's keeping you average. High achievers reject that mindset. They respect their energy. They protect their focus. They don't dilute their power by chasing every shiny thing. They pick the one thing that matters most, and they go all in. The fourth mistake high achievers avoid is emotional decision-making. It's one of the most subtle destroyers of momentum. One moment of stress, and you abandon the plan. One wave of fear, and you change direction. One bad day, and you burn the whole thing down. The problem isn't the emotion itself. It's that most people let their emotions vote. They let their feelings into the driver's seat, and before long, they're miles off course. High achievers don't do that. They still feel the emotion. They still have the fear, the doubt, the anger, the exhaustion. But they've trained themselves to respond instead of react. They've built systems that protect their future from the turbulence of their current mood. Because your emotions aren't always right. In fact, when the pressure's on, they're often wrong. Your anxiety tells you to escape when you need to lean in. Your doubt tells you to slow down when you need to speed up. Your frustration tells you to quit when you're inches away from a breakthrough. And if you haven't trained yourself to pause, to breathe, to override the impulse, you'll destroy things you spent years building. Not because you're incapable, but because you never learned to separate your standards from your state. This is one of the biggest differences between average performers and high performers. The average person lets their performance be dictated by how they feel. But high achievers reverse the formula. They make decisions based on values, not emotions. Based on standards, not states. Based on vision, not circumstances. You need to understand the difference between emotional truth and actual truth. Just because something feels urgent doesn't mean it is. Just because something feels hard doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because something feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's unsafe. High achievers build habits around this principle. They don't cancel a workout because they're tired. They don't change a business strategy because they're having a bad day. They don't ghost on commitments because their mood dipped. They do what they said they would do, regardless of how they feel in the moment. That's not robotic. That's elite. That's maturity. That's what separates leaders from everyone else. Because leadership isn't how you act when everything feels good. It's how you lead when your emotions are working against you. You need to build systems that support this. Pre-decisions, triggers, boundaries. If I feel X, I do Y. If I wake up low energy, I still do the non-negotiables. If I'm frustrated, I don't respond immediately. I write it down, I breathe, I come back in 30 minutes. Your feelings are valid, but they are not facts. They are signals, not orders. And if you can learn to interpret them without obeying them, you win. Not just in business, in life, in relationships, in leadership. Because the people who let their emotions run the show never finish anything. They're always starting over, always recalibrating, always resetting because they never finished the last thing. Not because it didn't work, but because they bailed the second it stopped feeling good. High achievers commit through the storm. They don't panic. They don't pivot every time the winds change. They stay anchored. And when the storm passes, and it always does, they're still standing, still building, still moving forward while everyone else was getting tossed around. This doesn't mean you ignore your emotions. It means you manage them, you study them, you understand where they're coming from. But you don't hand them the keys to your future. You don't let them dictate your routine. You don't make decisions when you're off center. You wait, you breathe, you check in, you remind yourself of your vision, your values, your goals, your standards, and then you act from alignment, not emotion. That's how you build something solid, something that lasts. High achievers know emotions are temporary, but the decisions made in emotion often aren't. So they've trained themselves to delay the response, to buy space, to let the storm pass before they steer the ship. And because of that, they make fewer mistakes. And the ones they do make, they correct quickly. Because they're not attached to the emotion. They're committed to the truth. The fifth mistake high achievers avoid is mistaking movement for progress. It's the illusion that because you're busy, you must be building something. Because you're moving, you must be moving forward. But activity doesn't equal achievement. Noise doesn't equal traction. Just because the calendar is full doesn't mean your goals are any closer. There's a trap in being constantly in motion. It feels like you're doing something. You're on calls. You're in meetings. You're working late. You're multitasking. You're grinding. But at the end of the week, you can't point to a single measurable outcome. Nothing got sharper. Nothing got finished. Nothing got real traction. High achievers operate differently. They don't measure their effort in hours. They measure it in outcomes, in results, in momentum. They know the difference between being productive and being performative, between progress and movement, between being intentional and being reactive. They aren't impressed by being busy. They're obsessed with being effective. That means they don't say yes to everything. They don't allow urgency to dictate their priorities. They don't start a dozen projects and finish none. They focus on what matters, and they get it done. You need to ask yourself, what am I actually building? What did I finish this week? What moved forward in a meaningful way? And what am I doing just to feel busy, to feel important, to avoid the hard work that actually moves the needle? Because some people would rather stay in motion than face the discomfort of focused execution. They'd rather answer emails all day than do the one scary thing that would change their business. They'd rather rearrange their calendar than make the call they've been avoiding. They stay busy to avoid being responsible. High achievers cut through that. They don't run from responsibility, they run toward it. They identify the high leverage actions and make those the priority. Not the easy ones, not the familiar ones, the hard ones, the uncomfortable ones, the ones most people avoid. That's why they win. Not because they work more, but because they work cleaner, more direct, more strategic. They use their time with precision. They build their day around their most important work, and they protect it like it's sacred. This means fewer meetings, less multitasking, fewer open tabs, less context switching, more deep work, more time alone, more silence, more space to think clearly, to plan, to execute, to do the real work that actually matters. And they measure progress based on outcomes, not energy. You can be exhausted and still have accomplished nothing. You can be tired and still be off track. High achievers don't confuse fatigue with impact. They check the scoreboard. They ask the question, what actually got built today? You need to do the same. You need to stop giving yourself credit for staying busy. You need to stop measuring your worth by how much you did. Start measuring it by how cleanly you executed, how effectively you moved, how focused your energy was. And yes, that might mean doing less, but doing it better. That might mean canceling the meeting, skipping the busy work, saying no to the good so you can say yes to the essential. Because most of your progress won't come from doing more. It will come from removing what doesn't belong. This is what high achievers obsess over: simplicity, efficiency, clarity. They cut what's unnecessary. They refine their process. They eliminate friction. They build systems that multiply their impact instead of draining their time. And that's why they rise. Not because they're busier than you, because they're clearer, because they've removed the fluff, because they've stopped confusing motion with meaning. And now every hour matters, every action counts, every move is intentional. The sixth mistake high achievers avoid is ignoring recovery. It sounds noble to push nonstop, to grind without rest, to wear exhaustion like a badge, to brag about how little you slept, how many hours you worked, how long it's been since you had a day off. But that's not strength. That's poor strategy. Burnout doesn't care how ambitious you are. It doesn't care how many goals you have. It doesn't care how important your mission is. If you don't rest, you will break. Not all at once, slowly, silently. First, your clarity fades, then your creativity, then your discipline, then your belief, until one day you're still moving, but there's nothing left in the tank. High achievers know better. They don't confuse hustle with health. They don't glorify fatigue. They don't wait until they crash to start recovering. They build recovery into the rhythm. It's not a break from the work. It's part of the work. They understand that rest isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That stepping back at the right time keeps them moving forward longer. That recovery isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and spiritual. And without it, performance suffers. You can't make good decisions when your brain is fried. You can't build deep focus when your nervous system is shot. You can't lead with clarity when you're constantly running on fumes. And you definitely can't sustain high-level execution over years if you never unplug. Recovery isn't optional. It's strategic. And high achievers treat it that way. They sleep like it's a performance enhancer, because it is. They protect their energy like it's their most valuable asset, because it is. They guard their peace like it's the foundation of everything else, because it is. And they don't feel guilty for it. They don't apologize for rest, because they know recovery is what sharpens their edge. The same way you sharpen a blade by pulling it back, not pushing it forward. Rest sharpens your effectiveness, your clarity, your creativity. You need to stop thinking that more hours always means more progress. You need to stop shaming yourself for needing space. You need to stop wearing exhaustion like it proves your commitment, because there's nothing impressive about running yourself into the ground. What's impressive is building a sustainable rhythm, one that includes periods of high effort and periods of deep recovery, one where your best work is supported by your best rest, one where you're not just grinding for short-term gains, but designing a life that works long-term. That might mean unplugging before bed, blocking time for reflection, taking real breaks during your workday, saying no to things that drain you, scheduling time off before your body forces it, creating space to think, not just to do. And when you do that, something powerful happens. You stop running from burnout, and you start building from overflow. You stop reacting to exhaustion, and you start operating from energy. You stop surviving your days, and you start designing them. High achievers don't rest less because they're stronger. They rest more because they're smarter. They rest strategically, intentionally, proactively, because they know the cost of running empty. They've been there. They've seen what happens when you ignore the signals. So now they protect their edge. They don't wait until they fall apart. They maintain their system the same way an elite athlete maintains their body, with care, with precision, with discipline, not because it's soft, but because it's necessary. You need to start thinking that way. Stop waiting for the crash. Start designing your rhythm. You don't need to slow down forever, but you do need to build in the pauses, the reset points, the recalibration, because success isn't about how long you can run, it's about how far you can go. The seventh mistake high achievers avoid is comparing themselves to others, not because they're immune to it, but because they know it's a trap, a silent killer, a thief in disguise. Comparison doesn't look like failure, it looks like inspiration, like benchmarking, like drive, until it turns into self-doubt, until it turns into distraction, until it turns into poison. You start watching what everyone else is doing. Who's ahead? Who got there faster? Who's making more? Who's getting more attention? Who's trending? And suddenly, your focus shifts. You're not building anymore. You're measuring. You're not executing anymore. You're reacting. You're not living your path. You're obsessing over someone else's. High achievers know how to block that noise. They're aware of the world, but they're not consumed by it. They use observation as information, not identity. They can see what others are doing without letting it change their direction. Because they know their real competition isn't out there, it's in the mirror. The only scoreboard that matters is your own. Are you better than yesterday? Are you more consistent than last month? Are you living in alignment with what you said mattered most? That's the metric. That's the game. That's the race. And it has nothing to do with what anyone else is doing. Because comparison kills momentum. It makes you question the right path. It convinces you to pivot when you should double down. It pulls you into lanes that were never meant for you. And before long, you're building a life that looks good online, but doesn't feel right inside. High achievers reject that. They don't chase trends. They don't follow the crowd. They don't copy the formula. They build their own, even when it's slow, even when it's quiet, even when no one's clapping. Because they're not building for applause, they're building for impact. And they know the cost of distraction. Every second you spend analyzing someone else's pace is a second you're not sharpening your own. Every time you wish for someone else's result, you're ignoring the power of your own process. Every time you let envy take root, you weaken your focus. This isn't about isolation, it's about insulation, protecting your mind from noise, from metrics that don't matter, from values that aren't yours, from pressure that doesn't belong to you. Because once you absorb it, it becomes yours. And now you're chasing something you didn't choose. High achievers don't do that. They define their own values, their own success, their own pace, their own path, and they trust it. Even when it doesn't look like anyone else's, especially when it doesn't look like anyone else's. Because they know what happens when you stay in your lane long enough. You create separation. You build depth. You master your craft. You create something others want to copy, but you're not distracted by that either, because you're still focused, still building, still anchored. And yes, comparison will still sneak in. It's human. But high achievers catch it early. They feel the emotion, but they don't feed it. They notice the distraction, but they don't nurture it. They see the noise, but they don't give it volume. Because they know their greatest power comes not from chasing what's loud, but from committing to what's true. Not from watching the race, but from owning their stride. And they run that race with blinders on. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're clear. That kind of clarity, it's rare, it's powerful, it's unshakable. And it only comes when you stop looking sideways and start looking forward. The eighth mistake high achievers avoid is waiting for perfect conditions. It's one of the most seductive lies in personal growth. The idea that once things settle, once you feel ready, once the timing is right, then you'll begin. Then you'll go all in. Then you'll finally commit. But that moment never comes. And while you wait, your window closes. Perfection is a mirage. It looks real from a distance, but the closer you get, the more it disappears. And if you build your life around waiting for clarity, for confidence, for certainty, you'll be waiting forever. Because clarity comes from movement. Confidence comes from execution. Certainty is the reward for risk, not the prerequisite. High achievers don't wait. They move, even when it's messy, even when they're unsure, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because they understand that momentum isn't found, it's created. Not through planning, through action. The person who starts now, even with doubt, even with fear, will always outperform the person who waits for everything to feel right. Because while you're waiting to be certain, someone else is getting reps. They're failing forward. They're learning on the field while you're thinking in the stands. And it's easy to disguise this mistake as wisdom. You say you're being strategic, you're preparing, you're gathering information. But at some point, preparation becomes procrastination. And if you're honest, most of the time you're not researching, you're avoiding, not planning, you're stalling. High achievers see through that. They know when it's time to stop thinking and start moving. They know they won't have all the answers before they begin, and that's okay. They trust themselves to figure it out on the way. They trust the process more than the plan. You don't need a perfect plan. You need to get in motion. You need to make the call, launch the thing, send the email, have the conversation, sign up for the challenge, do the first rep. Not because it's perfect, but because it's now. And when you act before you're ready, you build a kind of self-respect that no amount of planning can give you. You become someone who moves, someone who leads, someone who acts with courage, not just caution, someone who's done waiting. You have to kill the fantasy that one day it's all going to feel easy, that the nerves will disappear, that the path will light up with no fear and no resistance. That day never comes. What comes is you deciding that discomfort is not a red light, it's a green one. Discomfort means growth. Uncertainty means you're stretching. Fear means you're moving in the right direction. High achievers feel those things and go anyway. They don't numb it. They don't wait it out. They use it. Because when you take action in the presence of fear, something shifts. You stop seeing fear as an enemy and start seeing it as a signal. You stop needing the perfect moment and start realizing the best moment was the one you just created. And you don't need to leap. You just need to start. Progress is found in inches, not miles. Success is built one rep, one email, one habit, one decision at a time. And the people who wait until they're ready never get those reps in. So they never evolve. They never build resilience. They never build identity. High achievers are builders. They're not perfectionists. They're not waiting for flawless. They're moving with purpose. They don't need the full path to take the first step. They don't need all the data to trust their gut. They don't need permission to begin. And because of that, they learn faster. They grow faster. They fail faster. They recover faster. And that speed, that velocity, that rhythm, it separates them. Not because they started with more, but because they stopped waiting. The ninth mistake high achievers avoid is letting comfort become the goal. It starts small. You win a little. You build something that works. You stop struggling the way you used to. The pressure eases up. The chaos calms down. And if you're not careful, you start pulling back. Just a little. You stop sharpening. You stop stretching. You let yourself off the hook because now you can. But that's the trap. When comfort becomes the destination, progress dies. Growth dies. Hunger dies. And slowly, without knowing it, you start sliding back. Not because you made a bad decision, but because you stop making great ones. You stop pushing when the resistance wasn't mandatory anymore. You stop being dangerous because the urgency disappeared. High achievers understand this. They know comfort is a beautiful place to rest, but a dangerous place to live. They don't fear comfort, but they don't worship it either. They use it, but they don't bow to it. And when they feel themselves softening, they wake themselves up. They find new challenges. They set new standards. They create new levels to reach for because they know Staying the same is not neutral. It's decline. You don't coast in life. You slide, slowly, subtly, silently, until one day you look around and realize your edge is gone. You used to push. Now you negotiate. You used to stretch. Now you protect. You used to run toward the resistance. Now you explain why it's not necessary anymore. You've replaced the hunger that built your life with a logic that's keeping you from growing it. And it sounds smart. I need balance. I've earned this. I don't have to prove anything. All of it sounds noble, but it's comfort wearing a disguise. And if you don't catch it, it becomes your new standard. Not because you chose it, but because you allowed it. High achievers stay uncomfortable on purpose, not in chaos, but in growth. They intentionally stretch. They intentionally put pressure on their system, not recklessly, but strategically. They don't need pressure from the outside to push. They generate it from within. You need to do the same. You need to catch the moment where comfort starts replacing challenge, where convenience starts replacing courage, where your days feel smooth, but your edge feels dull. That's the moment to make a change. Push yourself, not out of fear, but out of respect, out of reverence for the life you're building, out of commitment to the person you're becoming. You don't stretch yourself because you hate where you are. You stretch because you love who you could be. And you do it with precision. You pick the area. You raise the bar. You make it non-negotiable. Maybe it's physical. Maybe it's financial. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it's relational. But you choose one area and you decide the current level is no longer acceptable. And you train yourself to seek that discomfort, not to prove anything to the world, but to prove something to yourself, that you're still sharp, that you're still dangerous, that you still have the ability to level up even when it's not required. Because high achievers don't need life to collapse before they grow. They grow because they choose to, because they've built a pattern of preemptive evolution. They don't wait for pain. They train through intention. You can't coast your way to greatness. You can't glide into your next level. You have to resist the pull to settle, to manage, to maintain. Maintenance is the beginning of mediocrity, and mediocrity is the beginning of regret. So raise it, raise the pace, raise the intensity, raise the standard. You've built this far. Now stretch. The goal isn't comfort, it's capacity. Not ease, but expansion. Not relief, but resilience. The 10th mistake high achievers avoid is forgetting who they're doing it for. It's easy to lose sight of it. You get caught in the details. You get consumed by execution. The to-do list never ends. The responsibilities stack up. And somewhere along the way, you forget why you started. You forget what it was all for. You forget who you were building this for in the first place. And when that happens, burnout sneaks in. Not just physical exhaustion, emotional detachment. You're still moving, but there's no meaning. You're still winning, but it doesn't feel like a victory. You're crossing finish lines that don't move you anymore, because progress without purpose becomes empty. High achievers don't let that happen. They reconnect. They recalibrate. They remember. They remind themselves, this isn't just about results. This is about impact. This is about legacy. This is about alignment. This is about becoming the kind of person they can respect at the end of the day. Because no trophy is worth building if you don't recognize the person holding it. No result is worth the sacrifice if it costs you your soul. And no success is truly success if it makes you forget who you were trying to become in the first place. You have to stay grounded. in your values, in your vision, in the relationships that matter, in the future you actually want. Not the one that's easy to chase because it looks impressive. Not the one that gets the most likes. Not the one that keeps everyone else happy. This life you're building, it has to mean something. Not just to the market, not just to the people watching, to you, deeply, personally. Because if you forget that, you will burn out chasing things that were never yours. You will lose your fire trying to live someone else's vision. High achievers build with intention. They don't just stack wins, they build alignment. They don't just pursue goals, they pursue purpose. They make sure that what they're chasing is worth the chase, and they course correct when it's not. They build with depth, with clarity, with integrity, because they know at the end of the day, they have to live with the person they've become. And no amount of success can fix a life that's out of alignment with its original purpose. You have to check in. You have to ask yourself, am I still building something I believe in? Does this still feel right? Am I proud of the way I'm living or just the results I'm producing? Because if the answer is no, it's time to realign. That doesn't mean throwing everything away. It means adjusting, refining, remembering. What's the mission? Who is this for? What legacy are you leaving behind? What values are showing up in the way you build? Because high achievement isn't just about winning. It's about winning in the right direction. Winning in a way that means something. Winning without losing what matters most along the way. So anchor yourself, not to a goal, to a reason, not to an outcome, to a purpose, not to applause, to values. Because when the noise fades and the pressure lifts and the results are finally in, none of it will matter if you forgot who you were trying to become. Success is not a mystery. It's not magic. It's not reserved for a select few. It's a result, a product of clarity, discipline, precision, and ruthless awareness. And more often than not, it's not what you add, it's what you remove. The mistakes you don't make, the distractions you don't chase, the habits you don't tolerate. You've seen them now. 10 mistakes that quietly kill success. Not the dramatic failures, not the obvious breakdowns, the subtle ones. The ones that sneak in when you're tired, when you're distracted, when you let your guard down. The ones that sound reasonable, sensible, harmless, until they start eroding everything you've built. And the truth is, you won't avoid all of them all the time. You're human. You will slip. You will catch yourself mid-pattern. You will look up and realize you've drifted. That's not failure. That's feedback. The difference is whether you correct it or normalize it, whether you adjust or justify, whether you return to alignment or keep pretending. High achievers don't operate from perfection. They operate from vigilance. They stay close to the truth. They notice the drift early. They reset quickly. They don't let one bad decision become a new identity. They hold the standard, even when they slip, especially when they slip. This is the game, the real game, not hustle, not noise, not chasing more. It's subtraction. It's clarity. It's cutting what doesn't belong so what does can finally grow. And it's committing, not once, but daily, to building a life that's not just impressive, but real. Not just productive, but aligned. So now the question is, what are you going to eliminate? What habit is killing your momentum? What mindset is keeping you small? What pattern are you still defending that you know has to go? What excuse sounds noble, but is actually costing you the most. Because the moment you cut it, the moment you make the decision to stop feeding what weakens you, you gain power. Focus returns, energy rebuilds, progress compounds. You clear the runway for a version of yourself that's been buried under clutter for too long. You already know what that version looks like. You've seen glimpses in moments of discipline, in flashes of clarity, in times where everything lined up and you felt it. You were on. You were sharp. You were aligned. You didn't need motivation. You were moving from a deeper place. That version of you is still there. And every mistake you eliminate pulls them forward. Every drift you correct sharpens their edge. Every pattern you kill becomes fuel for the next level. You don't need more hype. You need more honesty, more subtraction, more elimination. Because what you want isn't found in adding more. It's found in removing what's in the way.